power to maximum. We are going through,
says Maximilian Schell, who, as the charismatic Professor Reinhardt, is the commander of the USS Cygnus, the focal point of this spectacular movie. I remember when the film was announced in the press way back in the 1970s, and how it was going to be pronounced along with Tron as a breakthrough in the use of technology in filmmaking. I was immediately hooked on the concept, and with the entire centerpiece of the film being a black hole in space, a rip in the fabric of space and time as it was depicted then, it was a fascinating idea. I recall the critical reception of the film wasn't great, but I went along and saw it with my parents and I was amazed and enraptured by it. The entire film is summed up perfectly by the hugely evocative music. Which appears to swirl in a perfect rhythm, as if in time with the twisting of the immense black hole. The music, coupled with the special effects for me at that time, drew me in, and in the darkness of the cinema I really felt as if I were in space, idling along to the spectacle of the Cygnus and the surrounding madness of what a black hole represented. Looking at the graphics and the effects of that film compared to those of the likes of a film such as Interstellar, they almost looked like a cartoon, and they lacked depth, but the colour mattered because it brought it alive. The black hole and space in Interstellar looks bland compared, as if like a cheap firework. It works for what is an exemplary film, but it wouldn't have been enough to drive that in the film. The black hole is an action film at heart, and one full of drama and mystery. I have always felt that critics missed a lot of what made the film so memorable. Its mystery, the odd characters and the sense of what the black hole represented, and all of its possibilities. The crew of the exploration ship, the USS Palomino, are made up of reasonably well-known actors. Roddy McDowall had made a big name for himself as Cornelius in the stunning Planet of the Apes motion picture. He voiced the cute but occasionally annoying robot Vincent in The Black Hole. Others of note were Anthony Perkins of Hitchcock's Psycho fame as an assistant scientist, who at times shifted his views and opinions.
And to you, sir, and your magnificent accomplishments.
And allowed us to sit on the fence about Commander Reinhardt. His approach always allowed us to think positively and negatively about what was to happen, and for me, he played it very well. Yvette Mimieux was a female lead along with the crew, and she had in the film an unusual ability to communicate with Vincent telepathically. I recall thinking when seeing the film at that time that it was a bit odd and stood out as unnecessary. It seemed as if it was more of a plot device to connect elements of the story quickly, rather than fully fleshing it out. Ernest Borgnine might be better known as Cabby from Escape from New York and the television series Airwolf. In this, his character meanders a bit and you never really know what he stands for. He always seemed to play a decent enough person, always upbeat and jolly. There are things that occur in this film that shift this perception, which makes for an interesting change from him. The lead and the most sceptical person in the crew is Robert Forster, who is also known for films like Jackie Brown and Me, Myself and Irene. He was a well-travelled actor and well-respected. He plays the captain here and does so well, acting intelligent and always appears in charge. The crew do well in the film, but are always overshadowed by Maximilian Schell, who is enigmatic and always cryptic in his responses, which appears very much the way he comes across as an actor in much of what he has done. When seeing the Palomino floating through space now, I find it very reminiscent of the old planetariums, one of which I saw in London. It is easy to be critical of the effects now, but one thing that seems to have very much stood the test of time is the black hole itself, which comes alive with swirling colour and movement and changes according to the film's progress. Of course, being a Disney film at the time, it was a family film, and although it does deal with at times difficult themes, it does so in a way that never strays from being reasonably family friendly. An interesting point is made, if rather bluntly, by Ernest Borgnine when he looks at the black hole and states,
"My God, right out of Dante's Inferno."
This follows from a comment by Vincent that it is the biggest black hole he has ever seen. The comments and the way they are delivered really ramp up the drama and the tension, that this is immense, massively deadly, and with so much being unknown about them, they're having an element of death and destruction on a massive scale. It is handled subtly, unlike so many modern disaster movies, where someone is screaming at us of how bad things are going to be, or we're all going to die. It leaves room for our imagination to fill in the gaps rather than showing us every little thing. When we first go with the crew of the tiny Palomino craft and see the huge USS Cygnus craft just sitting there, all dark on the event horizon of the black hole, and see the struggles of the smaller craft against the gravitational pull, we can feel how dangerous it all is, and with it how inevitable the destruction would be if we were in such a situation and lost control. It just ramps up the emotion all the time. It does, however, of course, require a degree of imagination, as do many such films like this. At each point in the film, the music times to perfection with events on screen, from the John Barry theme to other music and beats to lead us right into events so it never feels dead. The film is driven along all the time without pause, where something is always happening by constantly asking questions through characters or from things that happen that make us ask just those questions too. Best of all, nothing is left unanswered. Nothing is ambiguous or leaves us wondering just what happened and never finding out. Such things can be annoying and frustrating, and this film never is. There are other things in the film that stand out, whether deliberately or otherwise. In one scene, Vincent turns round as a Palomino is caught by gravity, but as the ship turns fully 360 degrees, Vincent always stays upright to the camera. Why he would do so makes no sense, as in space there is no up or down. It's a fun moment, and the film does have such points, as if it is self-aware enough to wink at the audience. The USS Cygnus was a ship designed for exploration and to find signs of life in the universe before going missing. What happened to the ship, which went missing 20 years before, and to the crew later on, is a large part of the mystery. This, for me, was always an intriguing and sensational part of what the film is about. In many ways, it is similar to the film Event Horizon, which is much more graphic and adult in nature, but builds on a similar premise about a lost spaceship and its outcome. Throughout the film are constant quotes and comments designed to add not only to the tension, but to drive our imagination and to ask questions of us that are not only scientific but also religious and metaphysical in nature. Some might find this a little blunt, but I have always found it clever and interesting. All of this is driven by Shell, who, as the obvious mad professor, was a fine choice for the lead. His behaviour and charismatic nature never allow us anything other than total belief, and best of all, he eventually delivers what we all want from a film about a black hole, to take us beyond what we could imagine possible. No sitting on the edge and whining about physics and the passage of time here, but what is it? What can we see? What's inside? These are the interesting questions the audience likes to explore. This is the nature of space and our fascination with it, not the maths or the physics. The film has minor discrepancies which may not be deliberate, such as when Shell says he has conquered gravity for the first time and they think it's a marvel, and yet the robots in the film float around, including Vincent and old robots in the film, clearly using some kind of anti-gravity, so it's an odd point to highlight for them. The interplay between the characters is always interesting. You can feel the subtext between them, the unspoken tension between them, as if they are all vying for their sense of control. The varied shootouts between the robots are interesting, in that they come across as a video game reminiscent of the period. At the time, consoles and computers were in their infancy, and thoughts of AI were consigned to films. Now with the advent of VR, we see scenes such as these as if we were wearing a headset and shooting lights in the sky. It demonstrated how ahead of its time the film was. Another aspect of the film that stands out are the robots, who all seem to fashion in a similar theme of the time, where floating round metal balls or humanoid beings, which seem more like people in tin foil. TV programs such as Buck Rogers had a similar aesthetic, and often seemed more a limitation of the imagination than effects. The strongest element in the film that makes its biggest impact is the potential and possibilities within. It presents us with ideas and allows our imagination to take flight with them. Then, beyond that, it actually delivers on its premise and those possibilities, leaving us with a great sense of satisfaction. As a sci-fi fan, it delivers, and a mystery and thriller fan, it also delivers. At 91 minutes, it's very tightly paced and very rewarding. It does and says everything we could hope for from a film about such a destructive force in the universe, and for that it is most definitely a classic in my book. I wanted Reinhardt to succeed when I saw the film, but I knew he was mad and a bad person and couldn't be allowed to succeed. We still get the payoff we wanted at the end, so we're never truly disappointed. As if to reinforce the sense that the black hole is Dante's Inferno as the film progresses, the centre of the swirling hole is shown from being light blue to a dark red, as if right in there, beyond, is hell itself. The ending has strong spiritual overtones, suggesting a transcendence through hell into heaven. The ending, however, is once again pure science fiction and offers an interesting and positive outcome. Ultimately, it leaves us, the viewer, to decide what comes next, to ask the questions and always deliberate over what might be. It never felt like a sequel could deliver quite those answers to the questions that we might ask. And if it could, they would never deliver as well as what we could with our own imagination. The Black Hole by Disney is a great throwback to possibly a simpler time in such films, where fewer questions were asked about how and why, and where we could just sit back, enjoy the spectacle and be part of the adventure. I personally loved and am happy to recommend The Black Hole.